Golly, that means it's time to talk to Mr. Bob Pollock from the Penn State Extension. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are things for you?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Did you see, by the way, you can call Bob and ask him questions this morning if you have questions about lawns, gardens, trees, and stuff. 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. You can turn the volume on that up or down.
Well, the balance was, I couldn't hear out of the one ear.
You were unbalanced, were you?
Yes.
I've heard that about you.
Not
The ladybug cloud, did you see that in California?
No, I missed that.
A huge swarm of ladybugs that is so big that it is showing up on radar over California.
That'll mess up the forecast.
We have seen ladybug infestations, if you will. Thank you, Penn State. In our area in the past 10 or 15 years. But what it really brought home to me is nature really is a cyclical thing, isn't it? I mean, things work in cycles, and it seems to be ladybug's turn in California anyway.
Yeah, evidently conditions are right, and they were able to breed and repopulate.
Yeah.
And there must be food source.
Mm-hmm.
So
and the cicada,
that's right.
The cicada
cycle.
thing is every 17 years, but
yes.
Some other animals are a little bit less cyclical.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't really know that when it's going to happen. So they're experiencing it now, aren't they?
Yeah, they sure are.
Hopefully they'll have enough soft-bodied insects to feed on.
Yeah.
But some will and some won't, and so then the population will
get some chubby ladybugs.
Yes.
All right. I want to talk about strawberries. It is strawberry season, isn't it? Right now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's been for a few weeks.
Yes. Yeah. June is traditionally the month for June-bearing strawberries. I guess that's why they have that name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, we also have other types that grow differently.
Oh, other varieties of strawberry?
Yeah. So there's a lot of varieties of strawberries, but there are types that mainly just flower in May, produce in June, and then they're done for the year. You have to wait another year.
And they spread all year long. If you have strawberries, man.
And then they'll send out runners, to make new plants and keep the cycle going.
Yeah. So what is the strawberry crop like this year? You have said before that the drier the better, and it certainly hasn't been dry.
No. So, because it's a perennial crop, you kind of have to live with the weather conditions that you have over time as you have that crop in the ground. So you're always dealing with the effects of the wet weather we've had the last several years. So that can start and hurt the population of plants. There are root diseases and that can occur because of wet weather for too long of a period of time. So that will affect the health of the plant. It can also then affect how long that plant will live, too. So it can stress it. It doesn't kill it, but then it may not return bloom as well. You may have some of the plants die out, so the population is less. So then you're going to have less bloom, less yield. And then that allows opportunities for opportunistic things like weeds to be a problem.
Yeah.
And so that affects the planting. And that, in the home garden, a lot of that happens. You plant 10 or 25 plants, and then you plant them in a patch, but then you might only keep them a year or two, and then there's more weeds than there are berries.
Yeah.
And they are not strong competitors. That's another
oh, no. Berries come in and beat them up a little bit.
They're not like some ground covers that will just, take over and really shade the ground and they will outcompete other plants. Strawberries, for the most part, are not very competitive. So if other weeds and other plants start to grow, they will get crowded out and they will just slowly decline. And
so strawberries get bullied, do they?
Yeah, they can.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's a good way. That's a way to put that.
The berry itself for this year's crop, is it plentiful? Are they big? Are they small? Or is it?
Well, you'll get all of that, and it varies from planting to planting and area to area, and how they're grown, the types of soil they're on, the type of production system that they're in. So, and that's we can start and get complicated. So you
we
can
really
simply,
don't need to.
Yeah, you can simply plant them on the ground. So they call that matted row is what they call that.
Okay.
So you just work up the soil, plant the plants, and you have a matted row. If you go to Florida and California, and even around Pennsylvania anymore, a lot of people make raised beds, and especially in Florida and California, all those huge production areas, those are all raised beds on plastic, and they may only crop those for one harvest. So they'll plant them, and they plant high densities of the plants. So in the matted row system, you plant one plant every 1.5 feet in rows that might be 3.5 or 4 feet apart, and then you let that one plant grow runners, and then fill in the bed. In these other production systems, you might plant 50,000 plants to the acre. So you, instead of waiting for the runners, you just plant the plants up front, and then they'll crop, and then you rip them out, and you start all over again. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And then now with all our protected culture, you can even add that into it, so people will plant them in August or September, and then they'll put the floating row cover on them for the winter to protect them, and then crop them this year, and then they might try to keep them over, and then other times they'll just rip them out and start all over again. Treat them more like an annual crop, even though they're a perennial plant.
I was in Anaheim, California in February a few years ago, walking along the street, and I saw right there in the city, farmers had strawberry crops running right up through the field and up to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And they were ripe at that time of the year. And I think that's one of the things that we forget is that in other parts of the country they can grow stuff year round, and so they cycle them. Their planting season could be at any given time of the year. It's always planting season.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
right. Yeah, or it will be when our cycle is not. So a lot of things have come to be and are produced because you can produce it in one part of the country, one part of the world, and ship it. And get it to another part of the world. So we pretty much there's availability of berries, strawberries, all year around. When do you go to the store, the grocery store, and not see strawberries on the shelf? So it's become really an everyday thing.
So they're resting their fields at the times that we're growing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So their climate is such that can be completely opposite from what ours is. So they're producing when we're not. And same thing with tomatoes and other crops.
Yeah.
So that's why it becomes a blur after a while. And the availability is there. And I think we've come to expect that. And that's one of the challenges, because we think everything should be there all the time. And if you go back 50, 60 years or 70, that wasn't the case.
Yeah,
everything was very seasonal. You waited for that. And that's how June became strawberry month, and July became blueberry month, and because that's how it was.
Yeah.
But now with global availability of produce and food, that's all. Those lines have blurred.
Yeah, and around these parts, though, sweet corn season is sweet corn season, because in the middle of winter, we're not interested in the sweet corn that we're seeing in the stores as much, because we're thinking, well, that's not from around here, and we know how quickly sweet corn can deteriorate in terms of its quality.
And for months, it's been grown in other parts of the country where it's warmer. They can start sooner, and so then you see it on the store shelves because of that.
I want to get away from the strawberry conversation for a moment. We have a couple left with Bob Pollock this morning, and nobody's called, which is odd.
They're probably all getting ready to go out and
that
make that last strong drive to get something planted in the ground or do work because it's not raining.
Could well be. Well, that was the next thing I was going to ask you is, have there been any problems that have been brought up to the office having to do with a particular crop that is not growing this year as people would expect?
Well, and probably,
or is that going to wait until later in the season?
Yeah, that's probably going to wait. But there's a lot of things that haven't even been planted yet because it's been too wet. You can't get
Yeah,
in to
that's
work
true.
the soil or even plant, you know,
Yeah.
and it's pretty. Things never do as well when they're mudded into the ground. That soil needs to dry out enough that you can work it properly.
Get some air in there.
Loosen it up and get the plants planted under good conditions. So we might have a drive here this weekend, you know, where people try to get stuff in and
Finally get it in.
because we're really starting to push.
Yeah.
You know, time. You know, we're into June now, so we still have time for a lot of things, and there's a lot of shorter day crops that you can get in now. But some of the longer day ones, you know, like tomatoes and things that take several months to grow, and pumpkins and squash, and you know, some of those that are longer day crops. You know, you got to get them in, and if you miss the window, you're done.
Yeah.
You know,
See
unless
next
you
year.
have some other way to enhance the growth of that crop.
Yeah. We're going to soon be thinking about probably doing a second planting of beans. Normally, we would do a second planting of beans when the first planting was done. But now, this year, with everything delayed because of the wetness of the weather, we'll probably do that second planting in an area of the garden where normally we would have foot traffic. But can't do that this year because I need that ground to put the second planting of beans in. It's all strategy, isn't it?
It is, oh, yeah, there's tremendous strategy, and it can change on a dime just because, it's supposed to rain today. Well, then it doesn't rain.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. They can really throw a wrench into your plans and your timing.
Is there fantasy gardening league like there is fantasy baseball league and football league? And all
Maybe
those
you could
things?
make more money at that.
All right, there you go. He's Bob Pollock, Extension. Thanks so much.
Thank you.